Hi everyone. In this lecture, I'll be talking about attachment in infancy. All right, so what is attachment? Attachment involves developing emotional bonds with others. Ideally, attachment is supported through a process of mutual recognition, wherein the infant signals distress, usually through crying. The caregiver provides a nurturing response by picking them up, feeding them, rocking, changing their diaper, etc. And the infant learns that the caregiver can be trusted to meet their needs. This process of mutual recognition is associated with threat reduction and comfort and helps to teach the infant to begin to regulate their emotions and seek out aid when necessary. Accordingly, the opposite is also true. An infant who learns that their signals for help will be unanswered or who are regularly in discomfort will likely struggle with regulating emotions and establishing trusting relationships in the future. Why does this matter? Well, infant developments with primary caregivers may create what is called a working model that influences the way interpersonal information is processed. This may spill over, and usually does, into adult relationships and end up affecting the quality of romantic relationships and future caregiving for that particular adult. So let's look at development of attachment. As I mentioned before, the development of attachment involves interactions between infant and caregiver. It takes place in a sequence of stages. First, an infant engages in behaviors designed to bring the caregiver to them and keep them close. For example, crying to be held. This again is evolutionarily appropriate. The infant relies on the caregiver to take care of them for survival. Next, the infant will show preference for the caregiver by smiling, touching the caregiver's face, and trying to bring it close, being excited when the caregiver is present, and crying when they leave. Around 6 months of age, babies begin to seek out the caregiver by crawling to them and gauging how far away from them they feel comfortable and not leaving any further. The infant wants to know that the caregiver is a safe space from which they can explore, meaning that they can trust that the caregiver won't leave or abandon them. By around 9 months, the infant has developed an internal working model of an attachment relationship with the caregiver, meaning that they have expectations about how the caregiver will respond to their actions. In toddlerhood and later, young children attempt to influence their attachment relationships in order to satisfy their own need for closeness. This can be done by seeking out the caregiver, asking to be held, and wanting to go places with the caregiver, and other things. These stages of attachment are going to be the same or similar for any primary caregiver who spends a lot of time with the infant. This is important because many attachment theories emphasize the mother-child dyad, but many non-Western families come from cultures that include a net of extended family. This means that the, quote, emotional eggs of attachment may be more widely dispersed among several, quote, emotional baskets. So let's take a look at signs of attachment. We can start to see signs of a child's attachment to their caregivers during the second half of the first year, about 6 to 12 months. And we can see this through stranger anxiety and separation anxiety. Stranger anxiety is exactly what it sounds like, discomfort in the presence of new people. This may manifest as crying, pulling away from the stranger, clinging to the caregiver, and averting their eyes from the stranger. This response depends on the caregiver's response to the stranger, meaning if the caregiver speaks to and about the stranger in a calm, positive tone, the infant's anxiety may be reduced. There is also cultural variation based on shared child rearing, for example. So a child who is used to being cared for by multiple people will have less stranger anxiety. Separation anxiety is also exactly what it sounds like, distress over being separated from the caregiver. Interestingly, this separation anxiety is not solely emotional. It is actually physiological. Infants demonstrate a heightened stress response with higher levels of cortisol in their bodies when separated from their mothers or primary caregivers. We can learn about an infant's pattern of attachment to their caregiver through studies of separation anxiety, the most well-known being the strange situation test. The strange situation involves introducing the infant to a series of threatening experiences, including the presence of a stranger, the departure of the mother, being left alone with a stranger, and being left completely alone. Throughout each of these stages, the infant is observed to see how they behave and how they respond to their mother upon return. 4 patterns of attachment have emerged through this work, and we'll go through each one. First is secure. A securely attached infant is going to actively explore the laboratory setting, interact with the stranger only when the mother is present, and when the mother leaves and returns, the child or the infant will actively greet their mothers or seek interaction and comfort. Mothers, in turn, are able to reduce the infant's distress, and then the infant resumes exploration. This is because the infant expects that their mothers are going to be accessible, responsive, and most importantly, return. The mother can reflect on her own childhood and talk about it openly and coherently with mood-congruent emotions. A secure attachment in childhood may have an impact on adult relationships. These individuals may have an easier time becoming close to others and may feel comfortable in emotionally close relationships. They are able to depend on others and accept their partner's need to be separated or to be close with them without feeling rejected or without feeling smothered. With avoidant attachment, infants are going to show less distress at being alone. They're going to avoid contact with their mothers during reunion following separation, or ignore her efforts to interact. Mothers, in turn, seem to reject their babies and may seem angry at them for crying. It appears that these infants expect that their mothers will not be there when they are needed. These mothers speak of their own childhood attachment in a dismissive or devaluing way. This type of attachment also may have an impact on adult relationships. These individuals may be uncomfortable with relationships and with emotional closeness. They are going to prefer independence and freedom and don't believe that they can count on other people. Next, we have ambivalent or resistant attachment. These infants are cautious in the presence of a stranger and stop exploring when mother leaves. When their mothers return, they want to be close to her, but at the same time are angry at her, so they're difficult to soothe. Infants are used to mothers who are inconsistent in their responsiveness. Sometimes they ignore clear signs of distress, and other times they may interfere with the infant in order to make contact, so focusing solely on their own needs as opposed to that of their children. This makes their relationship highly unpredictable. Mothers in this category are overly preoccupied with conflicts around their own childhood attachment issues. An individual with ambivalent or resistant attachment may also struggle in adult relationships in a variety of different ways. They may be clingy or they may be very dismissive. It's going to be unpredictable, similar to what was experienced with their caregiver. And I have a page here. I want to be extremely close with others, but others may be reluctant to get as close, right? It's like they want to connect, but they don't know how, and they're afraid to be abandoned. Next, we have disorganized attachment, and these infants have no consistent strategy for managing their distress. Some of these mothers are negative, intrusive, or frightening and hostile. Other mothers may be passive and helpless and don't know how to comfort their babies. These mothers have often experienced loss or abuse in their childhoods. Adult relationships stemming from a disorganized attachment will typically involve being uncomfortable with others. They may lead to abusive or dysfunctional relationships, and there may also be a lack of empathy and remorse for individuals that they are in relationship with. Okay. Taking this a step back, it's important to remember that these different types of attachment exist on a continuum, meaning that it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to fall into one of these particular categories. And the strange situation test does not mimic real life. The expression of attachment behaviors is likely more fluid in real life, and these may be thought of more so as different dimensions, or again, existing on a continuum. In addition, there are important differences based on culture, wherein separations may be more or less common. Also recall what I mentioned at the beginning about the strong focus on the mother-child dyad rather than the extended caregiving net, and how this particular model may not be as appropriate for infants who have strong connections with multiple people. Finally, this does not imply that you're stuck with whatever attachment pattern you had as a child. You can improve your ability to form attachments by going through therapy, for example, or by having positive relationships. These would be called earned secure attachments, and they involve coming to terms with negative attachment experiences in childhood and healing from them, and learning to have better attachments. This is definitely something you may find yourself helping a client to do in therapy. So if you found this interesting and you want to know more about it, it may be really helpful to revisit your notes from psychopathology about reactive attachment disorder and disinhibited social engagement disorder, because these are very related to attachment. And these will be things that you find yourself helping folks with in therapy. But we can talk more about this in class during our Q&A time. Let me know if you have questions. Thank you.